Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Star Wars Armada as a whole, where the game is right now, what the future is looking like, and where I stand on some of these matters. This is going to be kind of like a public address, maybe some clarification on some things, and we'll kind of see where it goes. This is going to be kind of free form. I do a lot of free form type stuff, and this one's not going to be easy for me. I've been making this video off for a long time. So let's dive right in. Oh, I got to do my admin stuff too. Okay, here's the admin stuff. Links in the description below. You can jump in our Discord, keep the discussion going there. But if people who have other questions for me, I am certain. Please don't PM me on Discord. You just join my Discord and ask questions in the appropriate sections there. That'd be great. It'd be easier so I can sort through everything. I hate having 18 private message queues when I log in, and it's like I'm afraid I'm going to leave somebody out. And if you do it in public, I mean, if you have to, you have to. Also, we're doing a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. We've got about another week on that one. We'll be announcing the winner at the end of one of my videos and then starting the next giveaway right up. So if you're already subscribed, you're already halfway there. And I hope you do subscribe. Hope you like the content. Hopefully you stick around, and hopefully I don't drive you too crazy, because I do aim to please, and it's really difficult to please everybody, especially the bigger this channel grows. There's a lot of expectations on where I lend my voice and what I talk about and what I don't talk about. And that kind of is a good segue into the subject of Star Wars Armada today, because we got our last update in January from Atomic Mass Games. Of course, they're not printing anything else for Star Wars Armada. They're not doing any more development for Star Wars Armada. Their season of grand tournaments is over. We had our final worlds. We had our final year for under the AMG banner that concluded with Worlds, and then a few other GTO events, which were big sort of national level kind of grand tournament level events. So that whole season is sort of wrapped up, and it's left some people wondering, like, well, what's next? What's next? Because there's been there are a lot of community efforts. There's a lot of homebrew. There's a lot of things that are all stirring. One of the things that I do in addition to making videos is also, kind of catering or being a caretaker of speaks for Armada communities. I have a decent-sized Discord. I'm also the admin of the Star Wars Armada Facebook group, which is like 11,000 members right now. It's very, very big. If you haven't already checked it out, just search Star Wars Armada on Facebook. There's a Facebook group for it. It's pretty clear, right? And with doing these things, plus other social media stuff, the Reddit community is very big. There's a lot of other Discords. There's the Star Wars Armada Discord, the Armada Hub Discord, and a lot of other community Discords and things like that. I feel like there's been some confusion lately on, especially for new and returning players, as to what the current status of Armada is. And I mean that because in June there were a lot of announcements of different communities, different like sub communities within Armada, and there was a lot of things that people post homebrew cards in the Facebook group all the time, and some people get confused as to what all these things are. And I'm currently evaluating a policy to help kind of clear this up, maybe kind of saying, hey, homebrew stuff should be on Friday, or things like that. And if you have good suggestions for that, you can definitely let me know in the comments below. You can also jump into the Facebook group. You can jump on other social media links and in Discord or whatever. You can let me know in all of these places. That's fine. But I'll be talking it over, and there's a mod team, and we'll be also working it over with them, because I kind of want to do what's best right for the community, even if it's stuff that I am maybe not the biggest fan of. It's not, again, I'm not a monolith. I'm not the only person that plays Armada, and I have opinions, but they're just my own, and a lot of you guys have opinions too. But I want to start by explaining where we are for Armada. So this is like for new and returning players. All right, Star Wars Armada was made by Fantasy Flight Games, and just before COVID lockdown, it shifted over to, in 2020, it shifted over, or actually I think it was announced at the end of 2019, but it shifted over to Atomic Mass Games, right as the Clone Wars was coming out for Star Wars Armada. So I didn't get a whole lot of Clone Wars stuff, and that's really, I think, the crux of why some people are kind of disappointed with where the game is right now, because we didn't get a full development cycle for the Clone Wars to get them kind of brought up to the same level of kind of cohesive faction identity that the Rebels and the Empire have. With that being said, Atomic Mass Games never released a single expansion for Star Wars Armada in the 4 or plus years that they were custodians of the game. There was an OP kit that they released called the Summa of All Things, which wasn't a retail purchasable expansion, so that one doesn't count. They did, however, release 3 PDFs, basically digital updates. They're very, very small. If you added the sum of them together, it would probably be about the number of changes you'd get in a small wave of Star Wars Armada, like wave 3 or something like that, or like a very, very small wave of Armada. So basically, they took like all the cards that we would have gotten in like 1 or 2 ship packs and spread that out amongst 4 years, something like it, but without many ships. So they had Rapid Reinforcements 1, Rapid Reinforcements 2, and an errata points update that came out in January, the end of January, so almost February of 2025. Those were 3 updates that were made to the game. Now, when Fantasy Flight Games announced the Clone Wars, there were also a new version of the rulebook. So if you stopped playing like prior to the end of like 2019, I think it was like November 2019 when the Clone Wars stuff started to come out. If you stopped playing prior to that, you might not have been privy to the Armada 1.5 rule set, which was, again, done under Fantasy Flight Games. What that did is it made a couple, not too many changes. It definitely wasn't like a whole second edition, but it made a couple of key changes. And there were a few rules updates along the way. There was a rules update that, limited you to only 2 flotillas, and you couldn't put your commander aboard there. And if you had only flotillas left on the board, that counted as being tabled and things like that. And there were some, there's been some significant updates over the years, but 1.5 was the most significant. It gave us some errata on certain cards, points adjustments, and changes to how the evade token works, as well as changes like to pass tokens and how that system worked. Basically, kind of an overhaul of that system. Removal of like 2 cards that were, or 3 cards that were problematic, and then also gave us the Clone Wars with kind of a revamped, presence with new starters, and it seemed like it was a brand new day for Star Wars Armada. So if you stopped playing years ago and you come back, you'll see Clone Wars stuff. Yes, there are 4, well, I guess 3 Clone Wars, I guess 4 expansions per side. There's a starter that has 2 ships for both the Separatists and for the Republic. So there's 2 separate. They have single faction starters. There's a squadron pack for each, and then there are 2 additional expansions for each. And I have ship breakdowns talking about all of this stuff as well. There is also no product available right now. So at most places, Gamers Guild is a store that has some still, but not everything, and certainly not a lot. There's a lot of Etsy shops that are selling like 3D printed ships, and that's going to be something that, and we're going to talk about that. And I'm working on putting, a site, a page together on Crabbok.com that has a lot of like, different places that you can go to get stuff. I know other communities have done that. I'm also going to do that. I'm not trying to steal anybody's thunder. I think it's good information that needs to be in as many places as possible. And since I tend to serve as a gateway for newer and returning players, and a little bit less towards the veteran players, I mean, like all you guys that go to all the tournaments, you're not really coming to me for Armada tips and tricks. I would hope not, but maybe you want to know about Akbar Nebulons, and that's fine, because I think they did fairly well at Worlds, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, that's kind of the role I play. I kind of play as a hype man, a teacher of the basics, an introducer to the game, and kind of point you on to how to get started. And since that's kind of one of those roles that I serve, I want to be able to continue to tell people how to get started in the era of 3D printing and aftermarket ships and cards, and having to get your own maneuver tools and dials and things like that when product is no longer available at retail. I've been holding off on doing that for a while because, there could be some copyright things, although it's harder and harder to justify that when the game has been sunset and it's just not being made anymore. So, but I'm working on it. I'm working on putting that together. And so when I do, I'll have another video that'll be more of like a welcome packet for new players. So with that being said, there are also a lot of people that want me to talk about homebrew, and I don't realize not everybody even knows what homebrew might mean. And even amongst the homebrew community, I think there's some discussion of what constitutes homebrew and what doesn't. So for purposes of this video, I am going to call homebrew, I'm going to equate that with community content. And for me, that means any changes to the game. So if you make a new ship, that's homebrew. If you make a new upgrade card, that's homebrew. If you decide your ship is going to be 10 points cheaper than the same ship that I'm using, well, we're not playing the same game anymore, so that's homebrew. So points updates, I'm also considering homebrew. If you change the rules of the game, that's also homebrew. To me, that's what I am considering for purposes of this video. Those things are all homebrew. Now, if you're just clarifying, if like there's some groups out there that are working on like guidelines, FAQs, like Karnak did the CARM, Arc has done this ARM thing like that. There's guides like that are just existing rulings that are already out there and putting all that stuff together. I don't consider that homebrew because, again, you're not changing the game. You're just making documentation that's easier and more accessible, and I think that that's a cool thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about homebrew and my stance on it. I've certainly talked about it before, but I want to clarify. So I am of the mindset that I'm really not interested in playing or talking very much about homebrew. As a matter of fact, this will probably be the only video I do for a long time that talks about homebrew. However, I also recognize that I like to make homebrew, and I do that because I think it's fun to to me, it's like a thought experiment. Like, let me put some cool stuff. What if we did a defensive retrofit that gave your ship 5 more hull? How would I justify that? How much should it cost? I just think it's a fun thing because I love the game and I love to sit down and be like, I wonder. And I just sit there and I think about these things and, so I'll brainstorm and come up with stuff. And since I'm in the business of content creation, and again, there's not a whole lot of Armada news coming out of AMG or Fantasy Flight or Asmodee or anything like that. I'm looking for opportunities to come up with things to talk about. So when I do some homebrew, I've done quite a few. They're on Crabbok.com. I don't expect people to actually run tournaments with these things, but they're fun thought experiments, and some people will look them over. And I've had people say, "Hey, this is kind of broken for these reasons," and I'm like, "Oh, good point." Or some people will say, "Hey, this could actually work, but maybe it's point costed incorrectly." And I'm like, "All right, cool." But I just think I like having opportunities to talk about things like that because I think they're fun. But at the same time, I recognize a lot of other people really couldn't care less. And I get that. To me, homebrew is kind of like dreams. When I wake up and I want to tell my wife about this crazy dream that I had, and I was naked and I was in the high school locker room and everybody was pointing and or whatever, like those, for some reason I feel like I always want to tell people dreams, but when somebody else is telling me a dream, it's just like I don't want to hear about your dreams. I don't care. That's kind of like the same way I often feel about other people's homebrew. And so keeping that in mind, I recognize that, yes, I've made some homebrew. I actually have some more that I'm working on. I'm not expecting it to be great, but it's more of an idea. It's more of a hey, what do you think of this idea? Do you think something like this could, in theory, work? If I happened to be a game developer, these are first drafts that I would bring to a development meeting, and I would say, "Hey guys, these are some of my ideas. Are any of these workable? Are any of them completely broken, and why? Or are some of these stuff that we just need to shelve for now because we're not ready for for that yet? And then some of them are any of them good that we want to maybe submit into play testing, things like that." So that's kind of where my design approach is when I work on stuff like that. All right, so that's my stance on me creating homebrew. A lot of other people are making homebrew. There are a lot of communities out there. Kuat Drive Yards for years had lots of homebrew out there. There's also been Legacy, and then they launched Nexus. or which was Legends and is now Nexus. And so that's also, another homebrew group. There's the Armada expansion project. There's Arc, who's now said that they're doing homebrew. There's Olaf Cards on Etsy, and countless others. There's a lot of different groups. Okay. And some of those groups have had announcements at the beginning of June, and there's been content releases and things like that. Now, a lot of people have been asking me, "Are you looking at these? Are you doing this stuff?" I'm not looking at any of it. There's a couple of reasons for that. I'm not throwing an endorsement behind any of these groups at this time, because frankly, I think there's a lot of Star Wars Armada left to play before I start playing a different game. And I think once if I start playing homebrew, then I feel like I'm kind of playing a different game at that point. I'm not saying never. I'm not saying never, but I am saying probably not for a long time. And it might not be one of those groups. It might be a different group. I might even start a group. Not planning on it. I'm just saying. I'm throwing that out there for the. There's a lot of possibilities. There's new things that happen all the time, even within existing groups. There's been leadership changes multiple times. There's this stuff happens, and again, I think of Armada as the long game, and in the short time frame, there's been a lot of shakeups within a lot of these communities, and it's I'd rather watch to see what lasts for a number of years and seems stable, and then maybe that's something I might be willing to throw my support behind, but. That's a big maybe because I'd also have to really love it. So that's some of my thoughts. Now, all that being said, what is the core Armada going to do without new content? There are a lot of people that will say, I've seen people say this, is that the fastest way to kill a game is to not do anything with it and make it go stagnant. I don't think that's true in the case of Star Wars Armada, because I think Star Wars Armada is very well designed. I feel like if Star Wars Armada was going to go stagnant by not getting enough content, we wouldn't be here talking about it. You probably wouldn't be watching this video. We wouldn't be playing it. We wouldn't have had the biggest Worlds turnout ever. And I guess I recognize some of that was due to it being like the last Worlds or, the last AMG tournament for Armada. But to me, it tells me there's still a lot of people that are loving playing Star Wars Armada. Everybody was there having a great time. It was awesome. So considering that, I'm certainly of the mindset that, yeah, people will still play Armada if it doesn't get, updates at any kind of rapid pace. What do I mean by rapid pace? That's kind of a big question, because we were used to, for a long time, having stuff only once a year. And then with AMG, it was less than one full update a year. It was like one full update thrown out across 4 years. So I think the Armada community can go 2 years without an update. I think they can go 3 years without an update, theoretically. Maybe even 4, and people would probably still be playing. I think there's some advantage to having a game that's in a comfortable place that you can kind of walk away from and come back a year later and play the same game. It's one of those reasons that I like some of the older versions of X-Wing, where I'm kind of playing the Fantasy Flight rule set of X-Wing when I do the flight casual simulators and stuff like that, because again, it was familiar to me. It was stuff I knew from years ago, and it's comfortable to go back to. It's kind of like the same reason I play Star Wars Rebellion, an amazing game. Doesn't need updates all the time, although I would really love a second edition. I would love something new, but it's risky, because I'm like, yeah, but you risk breaking like this damn near perfect game. So again, I play Rebellion about once a month, so and have for years. So I love the game. Doesn't need new stuff all the time, right? So that's kind of my approach with Armada. Now, as far as the competitive version of Armada, how will tournaments look? How will Worlds look? Do we need stuff, to change the game up before the next Worlds? Here's my thoughts. We just got a big update from AMG. Not that big in the terms of like the bigger picture, but certainly AMG's biggest update, which had both errata and points of a lot more cards than we were typically used to seeing changed. And I think it had a profound impact on the game. Now, that being said, that came out at the end of January, so people had about 2 months to prepare for Worlds. That's not as much time as we normally get with a a large change to the game. And I feel like the worlds that we had at Adepticon 2025 wasn't necessarily reflective of how Armada will actually be with this new change. I think people were still settling in to the figuring out what the current meta was. For example, there were a lot of separatist lists because separatists got some buffs. But the fact that I think a squadronless fleet won worlds is definitely indicative that we hadn't really settled on what exactly the meta was. Now, I'm not trying to take anything away from that squadronless fleet because, yes, it was flown very, very well. I just think that it was so far out of the norm. I want to see if it can be repeated. I think it'd be brilliant. I don't expect that we would see another squadronless fleet, but what if we did? Wouldn't that change things a lot? And I think if people are looking at homebrew less as a hobby and more as a, hey, we need to really balance content for the future, they would probably start after Worlds 2026. That's my thought. I think that would be a good time. I think it would be a good way to look at statistics to see what happens in big tournaments this year, to see what happens at Worlds 2026, and then begin balancing content, designing new stuff that maybe it comes out after 2020, at some point in 2027, perhaps. That's, to me, that seems like a reasonable time frame. I recognize some other people might say that's way too slow. The game will be dead by then. If that's what you say, I have to call BS on that because I don't think we'd be still playing now if we couldn't handle a wait like that. But again, you're free to disagree. Again, my opinion is just one. Granted, I know that there's other people that share very similar opinions. So that's the thing. But there's other ways that I think Worlds in 2026, even with no changes all throughout this year, are going to be significantly different than Worlds in 2025. It's not just the meta. It's not just the fact that we haven't kind of tweaked all of our lists the way, I can run, more of this and less of that. Or, I found an even better approach since I can't use turbo laser reroute circuits anymore. I found, people are going to be trying different things. People may stumble across some unpopular things that happen to work reliably well that they hadn't used before. But we're also entering the age of 3D printing. And this is an important thing for the competitive scene. I think one of the biggest things that I'd like to see is, ways for TOs to be able to vet and ensure that when somebody shows up to an Armada tournament with non-standard product, when they show up with a Star Destroyer that's been 3D printed, to verify that that base is the correct size, that the ship token that's on there has the correct arcs, that somebody's range tools are correct, that somebody's movement tool is correct. The movement tool may be one of the most difficult things to vet because it is such a specific thing. And to be fair, we kind of have to let a little bit of slack go because all the movement tools in circulation now, a lot of them have a little bit of give and take, if you know what I mean. It's not as precise as we would, as the competitive player would really like it to be. I've seen a lot of movement tools where you're like, is that really on the one click there? Is it really? Because your whole tool is kind of warped. Did you leave your tool out in the car and it kind of got a little bent? So those things can happen. But as people come up with new versions of all of these things that have to be very precise in millimeters and things like that, I think that's going to be something that impacts Worlds 2026. I think also, since we won't be under AMG's banner in 2026, if there is indeed a Worlds at Adepticon in 2026, which I expect there will be in some way, shape, or form, maybe multiple Worlds depending on how things go. If 5 different communities each want to run their own Worlds tournament or something like that, that might happen. There may be other things going on too. There might be like Sector Fleet happening at Worlds. There may be a campaign event happening at Worlds. There may be other non-tournament type or non-standard tournament type things happening at Worlds too. I don't know. I'm not really intimately involved with Adepticon, so I couldn't really tell you what's happening right now. But I'm certain that if we're not under that AMG banner, then we also need to be allowing 3D printed ships. And if that's the case, the landscape is going to change. How many people would complain because they couldn't find a Venator? Now, if you can print your own Venators, now you can make that Republic fleet that you wanted to make that you couldn't make before. How many people are mad at me because I bought 5 Architons and I'm one of the only people in Orlando that has more than 2, or more than 1, or has any at all? If everybody could, had access to all of the ships, because again, product availability was a big discriminator at Worlds 2025. And then, honestly, at previous events too. Architons have always been out of print. A lot of ships have been out of print. How many people wanted to, run multiple gladiators for some kind of jank list and couldn't, right? There's a lot of things. ISDs, can people make those? Again, multiple Architons, or MSUs of another rare ship. Where you're looking to run like a whole lot of Hammerheads, quad MC30s. I think that if we can 3D print ships or get your ships off of Etsy and things like that, it opens up a whole new realm of the types of fleets that can be made and are likely to show up. People probably, there weren't as many Architons because, well, the same reason I hardly ever see them at any of the tournaments I go to, because not that many people have them. And when it was an FFG or an AMG tournament, you had to be running the official stuff. If it's being run by a different TO that's not under the AMG banner, then they can allow 3D printed ships, which I fully expect to be allowed from this point forward. I have no problem with 3D printed components. I'd love to have a nice way to make sure that they're right. I don't really expect people to be deliberately printing, large ships on a base that's 4 millimeters too short and things like that. I don't really expect that to happen, but who knows? Who knows what weird things people will come up with? I have seen people cheat in Armada. It's very rare, but I've seen it before and I don't like it. So, it's one of those things. I don't expect that to really be a thing, but there needs to be ways to verify certain stuff, or that accidents haven't happened. Like, oh, your print job ended up bad, and so now your Star Destroyer's front arc is way too narrow, or you've got the wrong thing, or you're running a medium ship on a huge ship base, and stuff like that. Again, most of those things would be very easy to quickly identify, but again, it's something that probably needs to be addressed. So I guess in my perfect situation of how Star Wars Armada would go, it would be that 2026 would follow the exact same rules, minus some tournament specific regulations with regard to aftermarket components. And obviously, prize ring rewards, I don't expect AMG to be involved at all. But who knows? I mean, theoretically, they probably could, but I don't think they would really want to do that unless, of course, they had to for some strange reason. Again, I don't expect that to happen. But if 2026 Worlds follows the exact same rules, I think we'd have drastically different results, because people wouldn't be restricted by physical product, and people wouldn't be would have a lot more time to have settled into the new meta that's arisen from all this other stuff. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm kind of not on board with so many of these homebrew initiatives that have had major releases and announcements and stuff. And I'm like, to me, it's much too soon to be trying to, put a whole nother content patch out there. Like, in theory, if I had a homebrew community, and let's say we were official, let's say we had Armada developers, and the blessing of Asmodee and an official endorsement from Asmodee to take over, and we were like the real deal, it'd be much too soon to release something. I wouldn't release anything until after Worlds 2026 at this point. And to be fair, wouldn't even do it shortly after Worlds 2026. I would think you would look at the data from the tournament scene. You would look at the data from Worlds 2026, and then you would say, geez, you might see, man, like all 7 of the top 8 lists all had 3 or more Architons in their fleets, for example. I'm not saying that would exactly happen, but since they did get a point reduction and would now be readily available to whoever wanted to 3D print one, that might be a thing. I happen to really be a big fan of the Architons. But like, if something like that were to happen, that might really impact what you were planning to do. And if I had a whole content patch ready to go right now, it might be kind of skewed in the wrong direction. So I would really start work on that. There's a lot you could do leading up to Worlds 2026, but I wouldn't finalize anything until after Worlds 2026. Maybe, have something released before Worlds 2027, and then But even if that was the case, it might just be points. It might just be very, very small things, possibly. And I'm still on the fence about that. I think there's other things that we could do beyond having to change points right away. I think you might be able to gather even more data if you were to say, okay, between 2026 and 2027, maybe the tournament circuit has a ban list. And they just say, you know what, let's see what people do if we take away PDICs. PDICs are banned. Maybe you ban like 8 cards. Maybe you ban 12 cards or something like that. I'd love to see what a ban list might look like in Armada. I think that's an interesting idea. I don't think it's necessarily the best idea in the world, but I think it's something worth floating around. And what I like about it is it does allow you to make changes and makes your tournament scene different, makes your meta different, and at the same time, you're not changing the game. Because one of the things that I'm afraid of is a new player shows up and they show up to a Friday night where we play Armada, or they show up to one of our smaller tournaments that we'll do that are kind of very casual friendly. We try to keep a lot of our events very casual friendly. It's a great way to get new players in. And my fear is that a new player is going to show up and they're going to be playing a whole different game that everybody else is playing if everybody else has adopted a community standard or a homebrew standard. I'm using those terms kind of interchangeably, community and homebrew, because some people don't like to be called homebrew for some reason. I don't think it's necessarily a negative term, but it has been used in a negative ways, and I've probably used it in negative ways in the past. I'm trying not to do that, trying to be more respectful and to cooperate and work with, the Armada people that are there, because look, man, I think everybody, regardless of what, sub community you may be affiliated with, or communities, because some people like to walk in multiple realms. But I think we all want people to keep playing Armada. We still want to see this game grow and thrive. But there's just so many different flavors, of it right now. I think the overwhelming majority are playing typical, legitimate, standard Star Wars Armada, like the official game. But there's a lot of people that like to play online at TTS or whatever, and try and dabble in different homebrew sets. Oh, I want to try this ship. I want a Lucre Hulk. I want to do all this other stuff, and that's cool. And I think there's definitely a place for all of that. And I don't know. I think I've kind of wrapped around, and I think I'm running the risk of rambling at this point. So I'm going to try and wrap this up. I know this has been a little bit longer than most of my videos, so I apologize for that. We can keep the discussion going in Discord. If you want to jump in we have a roles channel in Discord where if you join it, click the general access role, click the Armada role if you're an Armada player, and you can click for other roles, because what that'll does is that opens up channels. Like, basically, it's a way to kind of prevent spammers from spam bots from coming in and just spamming the whole Discord also. So like, if you log in, you may only see one channel. You may be like this isn't a big Discord at all. There's a lot of channels, but they're broken down by game or game category and things like that. So most people just get like general access and then like a specific game or two that they're interested in. Or you can click on everything and get all the roles and see everything if you want. It's not that big of a problem. All right, that's gonna do it, guys. I do wish the best for everybody involved here. I know that there's a lot of those communities out there that want me to do some kind of special endorsement, and I'm not ready to do that at this time. I really want to focus on endorsing Star Wars Armada as a standard, as a game system, because new players are going to come in. This is going to be, there's already a whole lot to introduce new players to, than to be like, hey, you're brand new. Here's all these ships. Oh, and here's all this homebrew. And then if they go to come, if they come to Orlando and want to play me or anybody else I know, they're going to be like, wait, why are you bringing that? That's not a real ship. And they might not know the difference. So, I mean, that's maybe an oversimplification of it, but I think I think you got to learn the base game first before you start adding on custom content. So maybe in a couple years that will change. We'll have to see how much more we can grow this community. We'll have to see how well tournaments end up doing. Again, and we can still keep playing tournaments. We can play Sector Fleet. I mean, you can play 600 points. You play 800 points. Game changes dramatically when you start going up to like 800 points. 600 points, it's a nice change. You can do a little bit more, and it feels a little fresher. and it gives you a few opportunities you didn't have before. But overall, still plays about the same. 800 points and up, the game starts to take a little bit longer, starts to get a little crazy. I hope you have some time blocked off, or you don't mind setting, hey, let's set a 3-hour time limit and then just call it, final round once that timer clicks. You can do bigger games beyond that. It's cool. It's fun to do. And going much higher than that is, I hope you're filming it because it's going to look pretty, but it might not be fun to play. 2,000 points, I think I tried to do one time. It took all day. It ended up being more work than it was worth. All right, I'm going to wrap up here, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll get back to regular content. We'll do like more card breakdowns, and I'm going to do squadron breakdowns at some point, and it'll be just keeping up with all of it, and more to come on the Facebook group too, on how we're going to try to keep the core Armada discussion not necessarily intermingled with all of the community created content, so it's a little bit more clear, because we do get a lot of new players and returning players in the Facebook group, and it's not a personal thing, not trying to shut anybody out, but recently, over the past couple of weeks, I have been completely inundated with like so many people that are just confused and like, wait, what is this? Why doesn't Ryan Kingston's have this? Because that's not an official card, like that, stuff like that. There's been a lot of that, and I want to kind of clarify things for people. So, all right, hopefully that helps. I hope I didn't muddy the waters any more than I had to. All right, that's going to do it for today. I want to thank you guys. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. So say we all. And always wash your socks.